You've been following a theme of fearlessness. Be fearless in confessing your faith. Be courageous. Be bold. Fearless, courageous, bold. Those are all words that Pope Francis uses a lot. Fearless, courageous, bold. Brave, the new translation of John's Gospel, chapter 10. I am the brave shepherd. Much better than good. Because in English, good doesn't mean that good, unfortunately. I'm the brave shepherd. So we want to be like Christ. We want to be brave, courageous, bold, fearless, professing our faith in a hostile environment. Now, tonight, I want to talk about the best way to be able to do that. And as I talk about that, I want to talk about the new exhortation from Pope Francis called The Joy of the Gospel, Evangelii Gaudium, the joy of the gospel. Because, in fact, the best way to be fearless, the best way to overcome fear, is to be joyful at the deepest level. If you're joyful at the deepest level, you cannot fear at the same time. It can't be done. That's why when St. Lawrence was being roasted as a martyr over the fire, he asked the grill master, "Do you think this side of me is done properly?" When you are filled with the deepest kind of joy, you cannot fear. Now, I want to begin by giving you an overview. There, I even got that turned in the right direction. Miracles will never cease. It really is pathetic, don't be afraid, Doc, come on. I knew I shouldn't have brought the darn thing. If all of you weren't here, I'd swear. Anyway, I'd like to begin by giving you an overview of E.G., Evangelii Gaudium. And I may call it E.G., because that's how we'll designate it when we make footnotes about it. E.G., number 145. So I'll say E.G. sometimes. E.G. is an apostolic exhortation, and it's a completely new kind of a papal document. Especially through the years of John Paul. I don't think there's anybody here who can remember before John Paul. Is there? Anybody remember? John Paul I? Pope for a month? No. John Paul the Great. And when John Paul the Great issued a document, when Francis issues a document, that was right the first time, When John Paul issues a document, when Benedict issued a document, the documents were teaching documents about the doctrine of the church. So when you get a teaching document about doctrine, the proper response to it is to understand it as much as I can and to obey it. To say, yes, that's the doctrine. Now, Pope John Paul the Great was a great philosopher, also a great theologian. Benedict was a great theologian, also a great philosopher. We have a long time, say 35 years or so, of documents from popes that teach us about doctrine. They could not be more clear. And sometimes when the media say to Francis, now are you going to change any doctrine? Are you going to change the church's doctrine about marriage? Francis doesn't give a direct answer. He just says, look, I'm a son of the church. I'm Catholic. Would you give me the benefit of the doubt that I'm Catholic? I believe what Catholics believe, all right? And what Catholics believe is spelled out beautifully in the Catechism of the Catholic Church and almost endlessly in the beautiful teaching documents about doctrine of John Paul and Benedict. Now, Francis does not see himself as a teacher of doctrine. He says that in E.G. He says, I don't have to go about listing all kinds of documents which people are supposed to obey. Now when he says that, the mass media says, oh, look at that. He's against doctrines. He's against obedience. He is just so cool. The lid is really off. We're just going to put away those beautiful vestments that Father Sternberg brought in, and we're going to get rags and riches here, and we're going to gather around the altar, and we're going to boogie with Francis. That's the mass media take on Francis. They created the spirit of Vatican II, which had nothing to do with the truth of Vatican II. Now, they're using the same tactic. They're trying to create the spirit of Pope Francis that has nothing to do with Francis. We're not going to boogie, have a great time, and forget doctrine, and just, I don't know what. Because we're supposed to be joyful, and joyful people boogie. No. Francis says in E.G., this is a program of evangelization. It's not doctrinal teaching. It's not that. He says it's a program of evangelization that will have serious consequences. Now, when we read it, do we find a program for evangelization there? Yes and no. If you think of a program as a structured series of steps that we go through to evangelize, there's no program there because evangelization is not a program. This document is a program for evangelization, he says. But he knows, he presumes, that we know that evangelization is not a program. So what's in there is not really a program for evangelization. He's not talking about the steps and stages of evangelization. He's doing it. He's doing it. Now, most of what's in EG has already been said by Pope Francis at his morning Mass homilies. This is almost a summary of his morning Mass homilies, and very few things are in that exhortation that I have not heard before from Pope Francis. What he's doing is he is evangelizing. He's setting the example. And what does he think evangelizing is? He thinks evangelizing is helping people to get freed up enough to look the merciful face of Jesus right in the eye. Look at the merciful face of Jesus. Behold the man and be changed by him. That's what he's doing. Over and over and over again, as it should, everything comes back to get close to Jesus. Close enough that you change. He said just this morning, if you can talk a good line about Jesus, but he doesn't change you, you won't do any good. And as a matter of fact, you'll cause confusion and division. So being evangelized is staring into the merciful eyes of Jesus in such wise that I change. That's what it is. Now, in order to do that, and this is what the rest of EG is all about. In order to do that, I've got to be freed up to do it. Francis is really disturbed about the division in the church. It's like politics. The liberals and the conservatives, and somebody's trying to make a loser out of somebody else. It's no wonder the church can't accomplish its mission of evangelization if a great deal of time and effort is spent fighting with one another and trying to win. That really turns Francis off. One of the main tactics of those who fight with each other is gossip. And so Francis, about once a week, goes bonkers about gossip. He turns red, he gets ticked off, and you can see he really doesn't like it. And if you look around at your average parish, what fuels conflict and division? Gossip. Do you know what Father told so-and-so? Oh, I can't believe it. Well, he did. Person is thinking, wait till I get home and get on the phone. I'm going to have a ball. Do you know what time Father got in last night? I don't know where he was, but But he must have been in an awful hurry when he left, because he leaves his bathroom window open, but he never closes it when he's out. And last night he forgot to close his bathroom window, and he ran out. When he came home, the bathroom window was still open. That's a true story from last week. Can you imagine? Division. In order to get beyond that, so that the church can evangelize, we have to get out of the trenches of battle against each other. We're a battleship. I've been saying for years, we're not a cruise ship. We're a battleship. We're not a battleship against each other as Christians. We're a battleship against the devil and the forces of evil. It's not that we don't want to be fighters anymore. We got to fight the devil. And Francis brings that up all the time. Combat with the devil. A key meditation of the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius. So we got to be fighters. But we've got to be united as disciples of Jesus Christ in fighting the devil, not divided in fighting one another. So to be evangelized is to be changed, and to be changed if we're more on the liberal side, which I'm not. If we're more on the conservative side, which I am. Even I, and this is the challenge of Francis, I've got to dislodge myself from that by God's grace. And so what Francis does in E.G. is he just goes on and he says one thing after another, and everything he said is designed to shake somebody up. Everything he says is designed to dislodge someone from his or her secure places. In terms of conflicts among Catholics, 1 minute he's upsetting Joey liberal. The next minute he's upsetting body conservative. And on and on and on. He says things to upset people. He's not teaching doctrine. He even said one time, if people tell you that you annoy them, say, I annoy you, blessed be the Lord. That's what he's doing in Egypt. He's trying to get right under the skin of every serious liberal and every serious conservative and dislodge them from their safe place. And what does he tell them to do? Just step back from that and gaze into the merciful eyes of Jesus and see what that does for you. In my own prayer, it's had that effect on me. I'm ready for battle against the devil, but I'm less ready for battle against wacko liberals. I want to see them the way Christ sees them. And I hope the wacko liberals want to see me, a wacko conservative, the way Christ sees me. That's what he's after. The mass media won't tell you that. They tell you one day he's going to, Next February, he's going to make a woman a cardinal. 2 weeks later, he's going to ordain a woman a bishop. 3 weeks after that, he's going to perform his first gay marriage. That's what they want him to do. And so everything he writes is interpreted to mean that he's going to do what they want him to do. The mass media is putting him in the liberal ideological box. And he's trying to stay out of that. But at the same time, he's got to upset conservatives too, so that we are challenged to dislodge from our safe places. This is an incredible kind of a papal document. Popes usually don't do this. But for example, at one point he says, now, the Pope should leave certain matters to local bishops. The Pope shouldn't speak out on every single issue. He shouldn't do that. And then a few passages later, unfettered capitalism is tyranny. The Pope shouldn't talk about everything, okay? That warms the hearts of liberals. But then, in a self-contradictory way almost, he says, look at how terrible capitalism is. That's an economic issue. Rush came out and said, E.G. is pure Marxism because of that paragraph. Pope Francis, when he was speaking about doctrine, said, he wrote a letter to an Archbishop Marquetto. And he said to Archbishop Marquetto, you are the most correct interpreter of Vatican II. Archbishop Marquetto wrote a book about Vatican II. And it's all about the hermeneutic of continuity, not of rupture. He said in writing, you are the correct interpreter. What does that mean? The social encyclicals of the 20th century all taught that socialism is incompatible with Christianity. One can't be a Christian and be a socialist. A true socialist, meaning state-imposed socialism. The church has always taught that that can't work because it maximizes the threat to human freedom. Whereas capitalism, within certain limits, maximizes the possibilities of human freedom. That's been the teaching of the church for a long, long time. Very clearly, repeatedly in the 20th century. Therefore, when Pope Francis says, unfettered capitalism is a tyranny, he's not promoting socialism. Why? Because he already said, I'm a son of the church, I'm Catholic, I know what the doctrine is, give me a break. I'm not teaching other doctrine. I'm not a two-bit heretic from Argentina. What do you think I am? I'm an evangelizer. I'm like John the Baptist. I am the voice of one crying in the wilderness. Make straight the ways of the Lord. That's who I am. John the Baptist was an evangelist, as was John the Evangelist. We've got evangelists all over the place. And now we've got Francis, teaching us in a ton of different ways that we've got to be free enough to be dislodged from our safe place, whatever that is, liberal or conservative or whatever. Because only if we get dislodged from our place of safety can we all be open to look into the merciful face of Jesus Christ and be changed by him. That's the message of Francis the Evangelist in E.G. So that with courage and boldness and in a fearless way, we can all be united to fight the damn devil instead of one another. So that's an overview of what's happening. And I hope that helps you to smile even more when you read what the New York Times says Francis teaches in the E.G. There are lots of spoofs about it. Somebody today wrote a spoof saying that Francis communicated to the Prime Minister of Israel when he was in the other day that he would not visit the Holy Land ever unless the Jewish government moved the tomb of David into the Vatican. That's the kind of junk the mass media are making up. It's as bad as that. New York Times didn't say that, but they wish they had. But make it as absurd as you want. They're trying to teach the Catholic people that the spirit of Pope Francis is wacko. They're putting him in the wacko liberal camp. And he's trying, in E.G., to use a shoe horse. Thank you. What am I, going dyslexic in my old age? To use a shoehorn, Francis wants to use a shoehorn to get us out of our rut. And the mass media are trying to put Francis in a rut, the rut they like. So be really alert and be really attuned to that. Now, the answer, the key to being fearless is joy. Now, what is joy in E.G.? One example that Francis gives is Christians should appear as people who wish to share their joy, who point to a horizon of beauty, and who invite others to a delicious banquet. Now, another bishop, this is serious, accused me of having written that sentence for Pope Francis. Because who else in the middle of something like this would have a delicious banquet on his mind? I would, but I didn't write that. Christians should appear as people who wish to share their joy that they already have, who point to a horizon of beauty, and who invite others to a delicious banquet. Joy happens, Francis says in here. This is one of his rare philosophic moments in the document. Joy happens when beauty and truth intersect. When beauty and truth intersect, that's unreserved joy. Because one can rejoice in the truth without restraint, and one can rejoice in beauty without reservation. Joy happens when beauty and truth intersect in my life, lived under the gaze of the merciful eyes of Jesus Christ. That's how it happens. Truth and beauty. Now, what do we have in our culture? And Francis addresses this. We don't have joy, truth, and beauty. We put that aside and we have pleasure. Not joy, pleasure. Pleasure in what is false and in what is ultimately ugly, but appears good at the moment, because the devil is a liar and the father of lies. That's part of the core of the message that has to be brought to this campus. That pleasure is no substitute for joy. That falsehood is no substitute for truth. And that ugliness is no substitute for beauty. How many great, wonderful young people come here? And however it happened to them, they come here worshiping pleasure as their God. Whether it's sex, too much spotted cow, funny cigarettes, God forbid violence. Violence is the new drug of choice. Everything that excites the lower passions and produces sinful, that is, ugly pleasure. And yet there's a culture here in Madison and at the university that encourages that. Because it's understood that there's no moral truth. You follow your conscience, which means follow your feelings that lead to pleasure. Conscience has been converted into a pleasure-producing enterprise. My conscience gives me permission to do what is necessary to obtain pleasure. The thought of real joy sits on the bench. It doesn't even play 2 minutes of the game. Real joy is not in the game. And yet there's not one human being on this campus who doesn't want real joy. They don't know what it is. If they have any idea what it is, they think it's impossible. And so they go after the best substitute for joy, pleasure. If we can get dislodged from whatever rut we're in and be changed by the merciful gaze of Jesus Christ, then they will see the joy. They'll say, what I've been seeking in terms of pleasure, these people have. But it's not fleeting, it's not momentary, like pleasure. This joy, when it abides, casts out fear. So that if we can get dislodged from the ruts as fellow Catholics that divide us, and accept the merciful gaze of Jesus who changes, then in that beauty and truth intersect, and there is joy. And that's the only place where there is joy. The joy that the world cannot give, the joy that the world cannot take away. That's the only place where it is. It's nowhere else. Other people seeking joy don't know it, but they've lowered the standard and taught themselves to be satisfied with pleasure, and that satisfaction drifts away as quickly as it arrives. It has no substance. It has no substance. So, if you want to be fearless, accept the joy of the Lord. You cannot live this joy and be overcome by any fear at the same time. Can't be done. That's why the joy of the gospel is a good time. Francis goes on to talk about the word diversity. And again, he's trying to dislodge all kinds of people. He says, diversity is not only good in the church, but it's necessary. Well, that sends the conservatives up the wall. And then somebody will write, the next thing he's going to do is perform a gay marriage. He's all for diversity. But if we read, what does he say? He says there's an acceptable, necessary diversity, and there's a diversity that's bad. The Holy Spirit is the source of all positive diversity. Because the Holy Spirit is the spirit of unity, and unity can only flow out of a positive diversity. The Holy Spirit cannot be the source or the inspiration for gay marriage. It violates the law of human reason. Even Notre Dame, from which I hold a degree, and Notre Dame football is under my skin, big time. I'll be the first one. I'll be the first one to confess it. But even there today, our program for lesbian, bisexual, transsexual, all of that. That, says the president, is a great step forward for us because we want to be diverse and inclusive. He's got the wrong kind of diversity. You better go back over e.g. Diversity that substitutes pleasure for joy doesn't come from the Holy Spirit. The only diversity that comes from the Holy Spirit is diversity that can be unified. Like the different gifts and abilities of members of a family. They're not all the same. There's a diversity of gifts. And they can find unity through the sacramental grace of marriage. That's diversity of the Holy Spirit. Diversity in the liturgical rites, the Eastern rites, the Latin rites. Now we have the Anglican rite. But those all come from the Holy Spirit who wills and creates diversity out of those. Marriage equality does not lead to a diversity out of which can come forth unity. Unity in one flesh, which is fertile, cannot come from there. Can't come from there. No one could ever claim that, quote, marriage equality supports the kind of a diversity which the Holy Spirit is behind pushing toward ever greater unity. Look at what the pro-abortion movement has done in this country. Where is the unity that comes from that diversity? The divisions are deeper than ever. So it is and will be with regard to gay marriage. God forbid that any Catholic Christian would be a gay basher or hateful. But this is a situation, and Francis, we've got to love people with the truth. But if, again, people would be dislodged from the ideology of the gay lifestyle and look at the merciful glance of Jesus and be changed by it, we wouldn't have demands for so-called marriage equality. The merciful glance of Jesus would heal the enmity and the nastiness. That's what Pope Francis is after. People say he hasn't condemned abortion strongly enough. The other day he said, I guess we still have human sacrifice in this world. No Pope ever put it that way before. He not only wants to say it, but he wants to say it in such a way that the one who is pro-abortion gets shook up. Are you a human sacrificer? And then he wants to do the same thing to people who are overly zealous and judgmental of women who have been pushed to an abortion. He's not happy, Francis, unless he's loving everyone, which for him includes annoying everyone. And when he knows that he's annoying everyone, and he really knows that he did it in E.G., he says, I annoyed the whole world, and the mass media have gone bonkers. Blessed be the Lord! That's what he is. And one last point, which I already alluded to. The famous passage about, what is it? Unrestrained, unfettered capitalism as a tyranny. Now, first of all, there probably is no situation of unfettered capitalism that exists anywhere. Certainly not in the United States. Every day, Obama is tightening the fetters around capitalism. There's nothing unfettered about capitalism here. And Francis knows that. He's making the point that capitalism at its extreme can enslave people and be very anti-human. Blessed John Paul made the same point in Centesimus Annus. Very same point. But Blessed John Paul added that regulated capitalism, which keeps the good of human persons in mind, is the best setting for realizing human freedom. And state-imposed socialism has proven itself over and over again to be the enemy of authentic human freedom and human development. State-imposed sexualism makes everyone poor except the leaders who impose it. That's why communism fell of its own weight under strong attack by Pope John Paul the Great. Francis knows that the Church has taught that socialism, state-imposed socialism, and Christianity are not compatible. That's what he means when he says, I'm a son of the Church, for Pete's sake. I'm Catholic. I know what the teaching of the Church is. Give me a break. You know what the teaching of the Church is. It's in the Catechism, and you've heard it for 35 years from two great teachers of doctrine, John Paul and Benedict. I got to do something else. I'm not as good of a teacher of doctrine as they are. But something is still missing. We still have a need for the new evangelization. Many people who know the doctrine up and down and around, ad nauseam, they know it, but they're not witnesses. They haven't been changed. Somehow they know that document apart from a life-changing gaze into the merciful face of Jesus Christ. It's not easy to do that. But I'm afraid most Catholics are in there. They either like the teaching of the Church about artificial contraception, or they oppose it. And they're in a rut. But the only thing that can get them out of that rut is Jesus, who gives them the grace that they have to respond and be changed. And nobody wants to be changed, it seems. So that's where Francis is operating. We got the doctrine, we got it in spades. We've got it with beauty and with clarity. We've got it. But where is the witnessing? Most Catholics choose the time they go to Mass on Sunday in terms of 5 or 6 higher priorities. And then the Mass gets fitted in. You'd never believe Jesus Christ was there. Some of them would get much more excited and make much greater sacrifices to go and see Miley Cyrus than they would to go and see Jesus Christ. People say the Pope picks on Catholics. He does. Those Catholics for that reason. So come on, get with it. Stop fighting with each other. Let's make Christ the top priority, and then watch what he does for us, and watch what he does against the devil. Just watch. But it's all going to happen because in looking into the face of Christ, we experience the intersection of truth and beauty. We experience real joy, which makes us fearless, and we are changed. That's the mission of EG. Thanks for listening to me. God bless you. If you have any questions about anything, I will be happy to take them. About anything.